Hello, I'm Peter Brodie. Welcome back to the sessions on Facebook parenting, the video plus the live session. We're at day 4 today, and today is the first day where we get into the more difficult phase. When I say that, it's not that I'm trying to make light of revisiting awkward childhood experiences and coming to accept where we are on our path. So I don't want you to think that I don't recognise how difficult that can be. But at the same time, we're now at the point where we begin to use what we've discovered so far to connect and communicate, or communicate and connect with other members of our family. And that can be a difficult task. It can be a difficult task for a number of reasons. One is that we may still be in a position of judgment of the other people around us. Accepting who we are enables us to accept who other people are as well, but sometimes we don't like to. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean by this, but sometimes it niggles that other people still haven't made their own adjustments. But this is reality. This is the case. And once we get to the point where we can accept ourselves, in a way, we've added to our responsibility to lead others towards accepting themselves as well. Now, when we lead, we don't push. You can't push when you're a leader. When you're a leader, you're in front. You're showing the way. You're not pushing other people into things. And you're not setting expectations. As a leader, it's your job to make sure other people are following at their own pace. If you go too quickly, then they will get left behind. So, with these analogies in mind, let's now think about a way of finding out where other people are. Because if we don't know where they are, we can't gather them up and lead them. So when we find out where they are, this is something we do by observation. And in fact, that was really the main task of day 3, or the third phase. It's obviously not going to be day by day, this process. It's something which is going to take a long time. But we will have reflected and noticed our own impact on our family, and we will also have begun to think about the changes that we would like to see. But if we want to see them, simply because that's how we would like things, then we need to make sure that it coincides with what other members of the family would really like. When there's been good communication in the first place, it's not really that difficult to continue communicating. If you've already got the communication and the connection, but you see that there's somewhere else that you would like your family to go, and you see that they would like things to be a bit different as well, then that's not so much of a difficult path to follow. But where there's been lack of communication and lack of connection, and quite possibly with teens an increasing lack of connection and a feeling of having lost them, when that's the situation, it's a much more sensitive situation which needs approaching much more carefully. One of the 7 habits that I referred to when I was talking to you about Stephen Covey's book is seek first to understand, then to be understood. In fact, quite often when we seek to understand, we find we don't need to be understood, but that's another point. The main thing is that if you want to communicate with somebody, you have to make sure that you know where they are themselves. For example, if I think I'm speaking to somebody who isn't even in the house and I'm simply talking at a normal level, then they're not going to hear me unless it's, by mobile or on the phone or something. But just normal talking, if somebody isn't within hearing distance, then speaking to them isn't going to have any impact. But sometimes they may be within hearing distance, but the communication channels have actually been closed. They don't want to hear what we've got to say. We don't want to hear what they've got to say. And we've reached an impasse. To get things flowing again, as the leader, we need to be the people to begin to listen. And listening can take time. I read to you the story the other day about the father who found himself that there was no communication with his teenage daughter, and in trying to establish communication, he found that telling her what his expectations were wasn't working. I'm just going to read through some of this again. I tried to read through it again yesterday, but I couldn't find it. But here it is. A year or so ago, my daughter Nell and I had fallen into a troubling routine. She would come home after school and I would ask her how she was doing, and she would say, "Fine." That was it. I could only get 1 or 2 words out of her. It had become a daily routine of non-communication. By asking her questions each day when she got home, it seemed like I was only exacerbating the tension. I remember reading once that one way to deal with someone who does not want to communicate is to break the routine. So one day when Nell came home, I asked her how she was doing, but when she gave me the standard 1-word response before heading to her bedroom, I said, "You don't want to talk to me, do you?" She stopped instantly, gave me a strange look, and said, "No," and went to her room. That was the end of it, but I knew I had touched her feelings. The next day I repeated the new routine. This time when I said she didn't want to talk to me, Nell said, "Not right now, Dad." This went on for several days before slowly, and on her own terms, Nell began talking more to me. Notice, just interrupting the story there, notice that it was she, on her own terms, began talking to him because he wasn't pushing her. Then one day I was sitting at the kitchen table thinking about something in a sort of trance when she was doing the dishes. I was quiet, not talking to her, even though she was just a few feet away, and it must have bothered her that I wasn't asking her questions as usual. All of a sudden, she started talking about her day, and she brought me out of my trance. It struck me that suddenly she was sharing her feelings with me, and it was so wonderful, I got tears in my eyes. Sometimes I think the most valuable tool for communication with teenagers is silence. Okay, so silence can certainly be useful, but silence on its own can also be non-constructive. If we're interested in somebody, if we're genuinely interested in them as a person, we need to find a way of communicating which is non-threatening. One of the things we need to do is to make sure that we're aware of circumstances and facts. I remember about a year ago, there's an online course that I was on, and there was a young woman there who was working abroad, who suddenly became ill and went into a coma almost overnight, and 3 days later she died in hospital. This was actually a shock to everyone on the course, including the person leading it. But and in the Facebook community which accompanied the course, people were saying, "Oh dear, I hope she's going to get better." And that's fine up until the point where she dies, but once she dies, there's no point wishing that she's going to get better. And yet there were some people who were just joining in the thread, just using it a bit like without even realizing. I'm not blaming them, I'm not saying that they're bad people for it, but simply that they wanted to communicate and wanted to be seen without having made sure that they were fully aware of the present situation. So several days after she had actually died, there were still comments coming on the Facebook page saying, "Oh dear, I'm sorry to hear about," whatever her name was, "I'm sorry to hear about that. I hope she's getting better," or "I hope she'll be better soon." And how hurtful do you think that must have been to her family to see that there were people who were actually writing on their own Facebook page or on the participants' Facebook page saying, hope you're going to get better soon. It must have been so hurtful to carry on getting these comments after they'd lost her in just a few short days without any prior warning that the coma was, that she was going to go into a coma, let alone that she was going to die from whatever she had. So the point I'm making is that when we don't appraise ourselves of the facts of a situation, we can seem even less genuine and less interested in somebody than beforehand. Now, I'm aware that I've been getting on for a quarter of an hour, and that yesterday I had to cut my video short because YouTube wouldn't let me upload it. So, I mean, Facebook will, but I would prefer not to overrun. So what I want to say is that when we go live this evening, we're going to be touching on some quite sensitive areas and talking about how to deal with things in a sensitive way, which is going to enable everyone to come on board so that we can plan our new family together. The next phase of our family's journey. Okay, that's it from me, Peter Brodie, for the time being. I'll see you at 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The clocks have gone back, so if you're not in the UK, then your clocks may not have gone back at the same time, or may not have adjusted, whichever way they go at the same time. So it may be a different time from yesterday. I look forward to seeing you on the call. Bye for now.